Oh, I didn't see you there. Shh, don't be too loud. We're here today in this deep, dark jungle looking for the ultimate life form. Surely such a harsh and dangerous environment would lead natural selection to shape the biggest and scariest organism, right? You know, survival of the fittest and all that. That's how it works, right? Hmm. Well, let's take a look at how natural selection functions. Maybe that will help us find this peak of evolution, whatever that might be. Natural selection is just one of many processes of evolution. If you recall from last episode, and you'd better, evolution is simply the change in allele frequency in a population over time. While there are many ways for alleles to essentially be randomly passed on, as we discussed last time, natural selection is like a filter that sifts for the best alleles and makes them more likely to be inherited by the next generation. But how does it do that? Well, not all members of a species are equally likely to get lucky and reproduce. While there is some random chance in who gets to mate and have offspring, for the most part it is the higher quality individuals of the natural world that have a disproportionately large number of offspring, thereby increasing the proportion of higher quality individuals in the next generation. God, that sounds really bad. But in the natural world, the thing that makes one higher quality isn't some arbitrary social hierarchy. It's their fitness. Hmm, that doesn't sound much better. Okay. In the natural world, fitness isn't just who is stronger or faster. I mean, it can be, but there's more to it than that. Fitness is about how well an organism fits into their environment, like a square peg fitting into a square hole.
Goes in the square hole.
It's all about the traits that allow you to survive, reproduce, and ensure the survival of your offspring until they reach reproductive viability. Sure, a predator might be a better fit for its environment if it were stronger and faster, but a prey species would be more fit if it were smaller and blended into its surroundings more easily. It may be beneficial for an organism to have a longer life so it can survive long enough to protect its slowly developing offspring. It isn't always about shaping a bigger, meaner monster. The fitness, or sometimes referred to as the success, of an organism is defined by the proportion of the next generation that is made up by its matured offspring. So, in a way, fitness and the natural selection on that fitness form a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy. The alleles that allow you to survive and reproduce are more common in the next generation because you survived and reproduced. Your survival until you successfully reproduce, and then the quality and quantity of your offspring are the only thing that natural selection is selecting for. Essentially, what proportion of the next generation is carrying copies of your alleles? Those are the only traits that the process selects for to make them more common. While selection is all about baby making, it isn't necessarily a raw numbers game. If it were, the trailer trash and Duggars equivalent of the natural world would exclusively be the only successful reproductive strategy. While many species do engage in a raw numbers approach, having as many offspring as possible and relying on the probability that out of such a large group, at least some will survive and be successful, organisms that take this shotgun approach are referred to as R strategists, which basically boils down to having as many young as possible and investing minimally in each individual, relying on group size instead. On the opposite end of the spectrum are K strategists. These species produce much fewer offspring over the course of their lives, but invest much more heavily in each individual. K strategists give birth to just a few or maybe even only one offspring at a time. They can then go on to spend months, years, or even decades nurturing, protecting, teaching, and generally preparing the offspring they are highly invested in. This may seem like a losing investment compared to a species that can pop out hundreds of kids at a time, but these Ivy League trust fund offspring are almost guaranteed to go on and be reproductively successful. Sure, our strategists are able to gamble and have explosive success, but they can also use a lot of energy producing a massive clutch, only to have most or even all of those offspring die. Where K strategists are getting a nearly guaranteed return on a long-term investment. Both strategies have their advantages. Our strategists often weather periods of rapid environmental change better due to their sheer numbers making it more likely that at least some will survive by chance. K strategists achieve larger body sizes that our strategists almost never can due to their longer periods of growth and high investment from parents. Of course, both strategies exist on a spectrum, and organisms don't always exist at the extreme ends. Many fall somewhere in the middle, taking advantage of some of the benefits of both strategies. Furthermore, there are many types of traits that can help you achieve these goals that aren't directly related to reproduction. Everything from your resistance to pathogens to the shape of your teeth can help you survive and thereby go on to reproduce, which means it can be acted on by natural selection. Basically, if it will affect the number and quality of offspring you're going to have, including surviving long enough to have any at all, then selection can reach it. Everything else is governed by essentially random chance. Alright, now that we've discussed what natural selection can do, let's cover what it cannot. It is extremely important to understand that evolution does not have a plan. There is no end goal in mind. It is a totally blind process that increases or decreases the frequency of alleles based on their reproductive benefit. It is not trying to reach some type of ultimate end state of the perfect organism. It may be a useful adaptation to breathe fire, but the intermediate steps to get there wouldn't provide a benefit and therefore wouldn't be selected for. The process can't look into the future and see that it would eventually be beneficial to keep going down a path that isn't providing a benefit right now. That doesn't mean that natural selection can't result in some incredibly complex adaptations, though. Like the bombardier beetle that can shoot hot liquid reaching 212 degrees Fahrenheit in the faces of its attackers. It just means that it had to arrive at those adaptations by following a trail of intermediate steps that were all beneficial in their own way. The next important limitation is that natural selection acts on a delay. Not only is natural selection not forward-looking, it's actually kind of backwards-looking. Since the alleles that are present in a given generation are based on what was successful for their parents, every generation is actually adapted to the conditions that their parents had to survive in. It might not seem like a very big deal that you're adapted to conditions as they were a few years ago, but in times of rapid environmental changes like major extinction events or what's going on right now, that delay can really matter. It's one of the reasons that species that are adapted to an extremely specific survival strategy are so vulnerable to extinction. If their niche rapidly vanishes, they won't be able to keep up with those changes and adapt to new conditions. This is exacerbated in species that have a very long life. Many plants can live for hundreds or even thousands of years. The conditions when they were saplings were very different. But when they produce saplings now, they pass on the alleles that help them grow, not what the saplings need to thrive now. It's like receiving boomer advice that's several thousand years out of date rather than only a few decades. Your generation is so lazy. In my day, we simply walked up to the emperor, gave him a firm handshake, and said we wanted to be part of the nobility. Anyway, the final limitation of natural selection is that it cannot create new variation, no matter how beneficial that new variation might be. It might be a great adaptation to have green fur to blend in with the grass, but the alleles to make that possible have never come to exist. Instead, natural selection can only act upon the variation that already exists in the population. If there is an allele floating around that helps an organism survive, natural selection can make it more common, but the allele has to exist first. Random mutations create new variation with no regard for what is beneficial. Then, non-random selection picks the best randomly generated traits to become more common. Despite all these limitations, natural selection has given rise to all the adaptations and unique traits that we see across all life on Earth. So, how does natural selection do it? Well, that is a very long and complex explanation, and it looks like it's getting late. How about, for now, we make camp and continue our expedition in the morning?